Okay, hello. I'm here to continue my discussion and my postpartum experience and also beginning breastfeeding. So, something that I wanted to also add to the whole birth story in itself is the aftermath of people's expectations and reactions to my initial decision of giving birth at home. And virtually a lot of people, relatives and friends of my family were at the expectation of uh, getting to know at the last minute that this is going to be happening at my mother's house. So once that it took place, the story became far and wide known. And that was very cool actually, because then it was such a new thing for people to realize that a natural birth process could take place at home and everything was fine and the baby was all right. So it did create like a very nice imprint in a lot of people's minds of wow, that is possible. And sometimes they hadn't even heard of birth in water and that sort of thing. So when I told this to my midwives, they were like, wow, that was a great job as well when it comes to doing good promotion to these kind of birds. And that was very cool as well. And also the fact that, I mentioned my mother went interfering at some point in the birthing process, but then she regained her confidence and was very supportive, and she remained very supportive throughout the whole thing. So this is to say that one's actions and one's decisions do have an effect as well on uh, planting that seed of possibility of how things can be done differently and not just the same as usual. That perhaps it's not the best way, going to the hospital and everything that happens there, and getting to know this kind of story and me sharing it after 1 year to say, it's been 1 year and 1 month and my baby is completely fine and healthy and it's the best decision ever. So postpartum, once that I gave birth and that she was she took her first breastfed. um, I was given the placenta to consumption, a part of it, in a sort of milkshake. We did ask for the placenta. I mentioned how you give birth to the placenta. So our midwives actually do medicine with it. It's called medicine, but it's just a placenta dried up. And I took it in capsules for, I don't know, probably a month or so, several, it was like 2 pills with each meal or something like that. So yes, I consumed it, and they explained to me how it was a really supportive thing to do because I was going to be kind of giving back to myself all of those nutrients and understanding the meaning and also the function of the placenta is something that I had no idea before they explained that to me. And I definitely suggest to mothers to investigate about the placenta, the possibilities of taking it home and making good use of it, because once again, it's just like with fetuses in abortion centers and that sort of thing. They take them for other purposes and they mostly sell that stuff because there's a lot of stem cells in the placenta. So this was like an added package to our birthing cost. It wasn't really that expensive, really. So they made it into some caps, some kind of pills, capsules with the placenta in them that I would take. And then freshly out of me, they took a bit of it and prepared like a milkshake with fruits and that sort of thing. And that's what I ate at night right after giving birth. I do remember that it didn't taste anything at all. It was really like a delicious milkshake. So that was really good. And I think that I ate the rest next day. I'm not really sure. As I said, things are hazy at times when it comes to this part of the postpartum. And it is advised also that your partner or the father also takes it because it's his DNA at the same time. My partner decided that it wasn't his thing, so I ate it the whole thing. And I don't know, maybe that was actually very supportive to take the placenta back. I don't know, but my postpartum recovery was actually really good. So good that I actually forgot to eat the next day. And this is a story that I want to share because the next day, it was a Sunday, and as I said, Minerva, I slept with my partner, and I was sleeping, and then I woke up, and I was feeling like, fine, completely fine, like as if nothing had happened. I felt like that, weirdly enough. Of course, you have to be very careful. Your pubic area is completely sore, and I do remember that a lot of stuff came out the first time that I went to the toilet, like blood clots and stuff like that. Probably I'm going to be a bit graphic here because sometimes people don't say it as it is, although many on YouTube share it as it is. And it was very painful as well when the first milk that comes out is a colostrum, right? So it was very painful when Minerva was latched and sucking the milk out, because they explained to me that as she sucks, then everything, like all your tissues and all your organs and etc., start going back to their position. So everything starts kind of rearranging down there, and it felt really, really like odd. It's not like contraction pain, but it was kind of painful. So those first days of breastfeeding were challenging. Firstly, because of that, when the colostrum is coming out, it isn't as much of a problem. Um, it worked well, as I mentioned, because of having the whole natural process. Really, like breastfeeding and milk comes out naturally, and I had no problem about it. So that's the only discomfort. However, here's the thing: there's a belief that runs in my family that it's better to give some kind of milk drink. It's called atole, made out of sesame seed, um, for pregnant, like, well, for mothers that just give birth, so that they have proper amount of milk, like a lot of milk. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. If that's what everyone does, I'll take it. Well, I took that milk. I had no idea that, at least a regular doctor would recommend not to drink uh, beyond half a liter of dairy when right after giving birth, because I don't know, that's just what they say. But in my experience, I drank a lot of that milk beverage because it's tasty and it's made out of sesame seed. So I was like, okay, let's take it. My problem with breastfeeding was that I had too much milk, too much. And I had no idea of probably the milk perhaps causing this. So I kept drinking this milk for, I don't know, beyond a week or so, until I started pondering what was going on. But before jumping beyond that, so that next day I was feeling quite fine, and I remember saying, they were like, okay, would you like something to eat, like breakfast? And I was like, no, I'm not hungry really, like I'm fine. I'd like to just eat an apple or so. And I was like, I don't know if it's the effect of all the hormones or whatever, but I was feeling just fine, like nothing had happened. And I felt tired perhaps, but I didn't even sleep during the day. I was completely asleep, and the midwives came, and now was the time when they waited Minerva and measured her and the whole thing. So that was what happened that day, and they were like looking at my position for breastfeeding, which was kind of not so comfortable with me. I was expecting like a little baby that I cannot show, but that you could hang like here, perhaps. That was a position like a baseball, I mean, like a football ball that you could kind of tuck into your, uh, like in between your arm and feed her. But that didn't work, and I was really having a like not finding the right position as well to be breastfeeding. So it initially wasn't that comfortable, to be honest, and I had to use pillows underneath me. And I was like, okay, I went to the whole explanation to the La Leche League meeting and that sort of thing. So I was like confident that I knew how to, but when you really have the baby and you have a hungry baby and she's very like desperate, she really when she wants her milk, it's like ah, and she would be opening her mouth like ah, just like that expression. And I was like, oh my god. And of course your breasts, the nipples get very they're tender and they're getting used to that, and they do eventually get sore. And that next day, I think it was all fine, like the colostrum was flowing, and that was fine. And that day I only received visits from my sisters and their partners and my nephews, and that was it. Like, we didn't want any more people by, and that was okay. It was our decision to not expose Minerva to bright lights and too many people unnecessarily, which is also something that I would suggest to anyone to decide, like who do you want nearby and around those days, and so forth. So this was very comfortable, but I kept saying like I'm super fine, I'm okay. I was laying down. Of course, you're not allowed to go downstairs for like 15 days. So I stood in the second floor of this house, and I did have to get support to go to the toilet, and my partner would go with me and that sort of thing, also to take a shower. But I was fine for the most part. But then at night, that was, as I mentioned in my very first video, that was really another story. I was super tired. I hadn't eaten properly. And till this day, I don't know why I didn't eat. I wasn't hungry. After all of those days and all of that effort, I wasn't sleepy. I wasn't hungry. I was like perfect. But at night, everything just took a toll on my body. And that's when I felt the real exhaustion. And that was very nightmarish, as I mentioned, because I would be closing my eyes and then I would feel like, oh my God, I'm going to leave my body. I'm going to die if I fall asleep. And that was really scary. It was late at night already. And I would tell my partner, like, I'm really, really tired, but if I close my eyes, I feel like I'm going to leave, like I'm dying or something. And Minerva was really like, wanting to eat, and I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. That was a mess. So why am I sharing this? Because if it happens to you that the next day, for some reason, you feel completely fine and like you can go and walk outside without a problem, take proper rest even if you don't feel like it, and eat properly even if you don't feel like it, so that you can possibly prevent what I went through. It could have been like adrenal fatigue that caused that, and just exertion. I mean, the body does take a toll. It does take the brunt of the whole process, and I wasn't feeling it right away the next day, but the second night it was like hellish. Till this day, I don't know how I managed to sleep. I fell asleep. I kind of died, but I didn't feel like dying when once that I went to sleep. And Minerva, she would wake up for eating during the nights, and I knew that that's how it was going to be. And suddenly, in terms of the psychological aspect, it was still like, okay, now I have the baby and kind of playing strong, like I can handle this. And which is interesting because when you give birth in a hospital, they take your baby away, nurses, and take care of that, and they take the baby to the rest of the babies, and you get your nice sleep, and then you get your baby back to you the next day and so forth. So you do have some time off, so to speak, which I don't recommend doing because your baby has to be with you. But being in such a tiredness state, well, she was with my partner that first night, and then the second night she was already sleeping with us. And I was like, okay, I have to get used to this because she's here forever. She's not going to be taken away, or I'm not going to have a break from here. So this is where the reality started hitting me, and also when waking up and and then having her and realizing I cannot leave her alone at all, and she wants to constantly be eating and sleeping, and I have to be with her. So picture how this is, because I was coming from a super, as I mentioned before, a super active lifestyle. I was walking everywhere and going to my yoga class and going to swimming, and all of this I did walking because I don't have a car. And that's basically how I roll. I was walking till the Monday before the Saturday that I gave birth. And, you know, I was super active and like having fun, enjoying me and my baby within me. And then when Monday hits, it's like, oh, suddenly I cannot go for a walk. I cannot do my life. I cannot even go downstairs. I was like, I had to obviously recover and take proper rest and that sort of thing. And I felt really, 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 really fine, actually. Um, as I mentioned, because of the water birth, there were no tearings. There were only some minor injuries, which is like normal because of the whole process of, passing a baby through there. My partner actually would be the one that was spraying some calendula spray on those areas, and he would be noticing how it also healed quite fast. I didn't feel any pain or discomfort in that sense. Of course, the uncomfortable thing was when the organs are going back to the position and the tissues. That was uncomfortable. And also another thing is that you cannot really make any effort with your abdominal muscles. So, it was like, oh, everything has to be done with your arms. So I'm glad that I strengthened those arms a little bit, but at times, you're so tired and etc. that you sometimes get very sore as well when it comes to positions, breastfeeding positions. So that's a whole thing that I guess that each lady will get used to in their own way. Like finding if you need a breastfeeding pillow, which I didn't have. So I was using regular pillows, which weren't the best actually, but it is what I have. Or I didn't have like a proper chair where I could be comfortable breastfeeding and getting the proper latch. That was such a whole thing as well, like trying to get her mouth open to cover the whole nipple area and properly have it inside her mouth. You can watch the videos, you can understand the theory, but once that you have the baby, sometimes it is difficult. And I guess that the main point here is to persevere. Very, very, very important. Like I knew that breastfeeding was going to be something that I would be doing for years. I'm still doing it, and I plan to do so for as long as it can be done for her and for me. But interestingly enough, I didn't plan enough, like where and how and which pillows. I didn't plan any of that, so that was a bit difficult when it comes to getting the right position and that kind of stuff. And as I mentioned, when the colostrum is coming out, things were fine, but there is a point when the actual milk starts coming down, as it is said, and that's when your breasts get really full, like you can feel them starting to get very hard. And what happened in my case is that my nipples were a bit injured because of getting used to that rough um, touch with her eating. So I had some minor like little injuries, and for this lanolin was very supportive as well. That I would recommend. It's supposedly safe to apply, and the baby can also eat it, although I would wipe it out whenever she would be going to eat again. That was very uncomfortable, to be honest. And it's those kind of things that a lot of moms say, no way, I'm never going to continue doing that because my nipples are sore and oh my god, my pain. Persevere through it, because right now, to my understanding, cutting off breast milk to your baby is a crime if you're having it, and if you have no problems with it, it's like the selfishest act And I'm sorry if mothers decide that, it's not their lifestyle or whatever, but when it comes to understanding the properties of breastfeed breast milk to your baby, why would you like poisons and chemicals like vaccines to um, give to your baby when you have stem cells and a lot of nutrients and basically the whole repertoire of um, vitamins and everything that your baby requires is in your milk, and your milk is specific for your baby. And actually the nipple is like a receptor, like a connector, like a plug-in point where that knows what your baby is requiring. So your milk is very specific to your baby. Now, what I was mentioning with this milk beverage that I was drinking, my theory is that it created more milk than I needed. Like basically, I didn't need to be drinking that stuff to create more milk. I had a lot. So what was happening is that Minerva was choking, and this is not a nice experience because all the videos that you see is how to make more milk. Oh, my milk isn't that much. How can I, fulfill my baby and that sort of thing, which is also more like a myth, as I've explained, because the whole milk or the letdown of the milk, the creation of the milk, is entirely linked to the birthing process, and it never runs out. That's also a myth. It is like a constant renewal process. So the more that you give, the more is created. So this is also for women, let go of fears of I don't have enough milk, or I'm not giving my baby sufficient milk, or they're not getting full. Beware if they were given glucose, for example, in hospitals, because that's also something that happens, or the effect of medicines and vaccines and so forth that disrupt this whole naturally perfect process, really. So I was having too much, and this is something that I was like not putting one and one together and realizing that this is what's going on. So what ended up happening is that once that the milk was coming out, the letdown, my breasts got very congested, like very, very hard. It's like you can feel almost like veins popping out. And that was starting to get scary because you have some minor injuries in the nipples, and you don't want your baby to be sucking there anymore. And I was like, oh my god, this is so difficult and so painful. And I would literally, yes, grab something to bite it on it while my baby would first latch. It would get better once that some minutes had gone by, but I had to unclog the conducts for the milk to come out. So my sister, thankfully enough, she had been through that process, and she made a video for me where she shows exactly how to do the massage for to press the breasts and to get the milk out, which is basically pressing from around the breast towards the nipple area in all directions, like really, really hard. Uh, Preferably to do this under a hot shower, um, or hot water, or some damp hot cloths, warm, to assist with that relief process. At least that's what worked for me. And actually, my mother had to do it for me because I wasn't brave enough to do it on myself. So she had to do it, and I was like biting this towel. I'm like, it was really uncomfortable. Um, and then it's like little pieces of, I don't know if it was like scabbing or whatever came out, and the milk started flowing, which was like, oh, okay, hooray. So now all that had to happen is in those first 7 days to get used to the nipple being sucked and getting those scabs gone. And I would use the lanolin for this, but it wasn't long really, to get that adjusted and no longer feel pain. So please, 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 new mothers, persevere with your breastfeeding process. I know it hurts, but if you want further support on this, or how to exactly do the massage, also to not get mastitis or the inflammation of the mammal glands, research about it, how to prevent that, because sometimes people, mothers, give up. I keep saying people when it's only women and mothers that milk, breastfeed. So yeah, that's what makes a lot of women give up on their breastfeeding process. Please don't. Please do this, if you want to call it sacrifice, for your baby, for their well-being. I can assure you it's the best gift of life. Like my mother, for example, she didn't breastfeed my first, well, her first daughter. Until this day, she regrets it. She followed her ignorant doctor's orders of, oh no, you cannot breastfeed because you're still studying, and how are you going to do that, and blah blah blah. Which could be done. There are always ways to give your baby your milk, but she was young, she was ignorant, and she followed doctor as an authority. Until this day, she regrets it. It's an obvious difference. You can see it between the one, us, my other sister and I, that were breastfed, and my other sister, when it comes to physical, um, you know, construction and so forth. And that is kind of sad, that a lot of first sons or daughters have to go through that kind of thing. And then the second one, parents realize, oh, I messed up, and then correct themselves. But why not properly educating yourself with the first one, right? So I knew that breastfeeding was going to be my thing, but it, that's the thing with me. Like, oh yeah, I know I will be breastfeeding. Oh yeah, I will do this like 3 years or more. But once that you're in it, and a person like me, once again, that was in that whole mindset and that lifestyle of activity and going everywhere, like now my whole life was, being with my baby and completely taking care of her all the time. I barely had time to go to the toilet. My partner was with me, and I'll get to that phase. But he was the one, of course, being with her when I would shower, I would go to the toilet, or I had to be eating, and that was it. We were staying here at my parents for the whole quarantine, which was also very supportive when it comes to the cooking process, because I wasn't even able to go downstairs. So she was really kind enough, along with my father, to be having us three now here. And that assisted us a lot, because we had to take care of is Minerva, and changing diapers and feeding her and being with her the whole time, um, and washing her clothes, which my partner took care of. So he was the one like washing all the clothes, because yes, you get a lot of poopies and whatever's on a lot of the clothes and that sort of thing. And that was his thing. We did have a crib, actually, that my aunt lent us, and we only once tried to use it, and of course she didn't like it, and I was like, I'm never going to use that thing. And I told her I did, but we didn't. And that is another thing, like the clashing of the way that my parents, my relatives, have um, raised their children, their babies, and our way, and what was making sense to us. And this is very, 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 very important, that if you're with your mother or other relatives or friends that tell you like, no, you're gonna make your baby dependent on you if you're holding them the whole time. If you feel like you want to carry your baby the whole time, do so. Like, stand your ground on that. And this is where it comes. It was really supported to be with my parents, but it was also very difficult and very stressful, actually unnecessarily stressful, because they were like, oh no, no, she's gonna be cold, and cover her up and use more blankets. And oh my god, it was unnecessarily stressful. And yeah, it was very supportive for all the physical things that I mentioned, like the food, and having not having to be worrying about our survival and that sort of thing. But it was also very stressful, because there were confrontations of me like going outside to the garden, and my mother coming at me and saying I was like a bad mother because I didn't have a blanket on me when it was like completely fine in terms of the weather. So till this day, there are such things, and I will discuss them probably in another video. But this is something important and relevant to along with your partner decide what kind of cares and what kind of beliefs you're going to be following when it comes to raising your child and taking care of your newborn as well. Because if I would follow the the recipes that I would get from my family, and no disrespect, I mean, they had their time, they already had their children or grandchildren if my sisters allowed that kind of advices. But no, we're different people and we have a completely different raising uh, attitude and plan for our child. And till this day, it keeps crashing a lot with their ideas, and that can cause unnecessary rifts. So my mother can be very stubborn. I am very stubborn as well. So we clash quite often when it comes to that. Until this day, we are kind of deciding that, okay, whenever you get afraid of something and you mention it, then we will remain quiet. And that will mean that we don't agree with that kind of fear or that kind of concern and worry, because the mother system, and I understand it, it's how it works. It's like constant fear, constant worry, constant something is going to happen to the child. And this is something that is also very close to my heart to share. I heard many horror stories of newborns. Oh, they cry the whole time. Oh, you don't know what to do with them. It feels like they're suffering because of something, and you have to rush them to the doctor and sleepless nights. Oh my god, it's just so terrible. Everyone told us these kind of stories all the time before we gave birth, and we were like, okay, we'll see. Yeah, we're ready for that. It really sucks that other parents almost feel like they want you to go through the same suffering that they did. uh, and it's really lame, because that is the kind of stuff that would create this anxiety and fear within me of, no, I don't want to have children. Why would I go through such torture? It's not like that. If you have a natural birth, and if you start um, living with your baby and exposing her to light, and not close curtains for her to sleep, but allow her to see light even throughout the day as she sleeps, and prepare for the night time and the lights and so forth. It really took like 3 weeks for Minerva to fully uh, be accustomed of going to sleep around 8:30, 9 p.m. and wake up at 7, 8 a.m. the next day. Of course, she has multiple takes of breastfeeding during the night. That's still happening till today. And I cannot understand why some parents would be bothered by that. And I include the father because sometimes they are also bothered, like, why is the baby wanting to eat at this time? Well, that's their food. I'm sorry, they have a small stomach, so you cannot fill them for the whole night and then expect to have your sleep. I remember someone sharing to me even some kind of podcast of how to train your baby to sleep throughout the whole night. And I was like, oh my God, where does that information come from? What is your point with wanting to have a baby and not be disturbed and have your whole night? I'm sorry if I'm being a bit sarcastic here, but it's baffling that people say they want to have kids and they're desiring them, and they do not completely realize that this is an unconditional love process. You will be disturbed, you will have your sleep disturbed, you will have your life completely taken upside down. But that's what this is about. And embracing it is not an easy thing. Tell me about it. Mrs. I'm independent and I don't like anyone telling me what to do, and I go everywhere where I want and whenever I want. That whole thing was like the old me. So yes, the morning process has started as well when it comes to that, and my beautiful way to sleep the whole night and not be awakened. I'm still awakened, of course, and I will continue to be, because that's how it goes with a baby. But I know the benefit that breastfeeding is, and that is given to my child. And it's very noticeable because, once again, she's 1 year 1 month old and she's perfectly fine. So that's how it goes with the nights. And as I was mentioning, 3 weeks, and she was able to get used to not being awake during the night. Was it difficult before that? Yes, sometimes she would wake at night and she would be crying, and there was no way to. I was like really in that state of, oh my God, what can we do? Like, I was trying to feed her, but then that's when the choking was happening. I was having too much milk. And there is another process here that we got to only read about later on in the La Leche League website, where there's phases to the breast milk. So sometimes, and this also depends on the baby's necessity, and because the milk is actually made according to your baby. So the first one that comes out is like watery, and then after a few seconds, apparently, it starts becoming more fatty and more substantial. That's when it becomes more dense and not so watery. Sorry. So what would happen is that she would get too much of that water. She would start choking and crying. And I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with my milk? Is there something that I'm doing wrong, or the position and whatever? And it was just that she was taking too much of that water, but not getting to the real meaty part of the, the milk. So it was only later on, after we read this article, that I was investigating now on the Leche League site of what happens when my baby doesn't want to eat, or starts crying when latching, like what's going on. And we found that it was probably and most likely that. So the solution to that is, instead of giving in one take from one breast, and then the second time that they eat from the other, I would remain giving milk from one breast for like the 6 hours that I would be feeding her intermittently. I would be doing from one breast only. And then when I would feel that it was like getting empty, which never does, but you can feel, once that you get the hang out of it, you can feel like if you press both of your breasts, you will feel which one is a bit emptier. So during those, I don't know how long we did this, probably like a month or two or more, when I had this method of only giving her from one breast, and then getting that marvelous outcome of when the baby's fulfilled, they fall asleep because they are satisfied. That happened rarely as well, um, like in the first go of, or the first take, because once again I was having too much milk, and I only found out later, like, oh, I need to reduce my milk intake, and I didn't need any extra support to have more milk, because I actually have more than enough milk, and it would spill out everywhere, and it is still kind of like that. But you get used to it. I mean, I'm rather thankful that I have enough, more than enough milk, rather than believing or suffering from not having sufficient milk. But anyways, so that is one of the things that we went through, that was kind of troublesome, and sometimes worrying about the whole breastfeeding process. And when it came to crying, I remember also these horror stories of, as I was saying, kids, babies crying the whole night, and you can stop them. I think that it is because of medicine, probably even vaccines, that they go through pains or whatever, and that's what happens to them. When she would cry and she would be awake at night, and I was still like recovering, super tired, my partner would be the one waking up and making her burp. That was his job every single time, and he would be like walking her around, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sleep. After that second day, yes, it took like, I don't know, a week or 15 days to fully get my skin color back, like my tonality back. I was feeling quite weak and so forth, but overall quite fine actually. And my mother was very surprised as well when it comes to seeing me, like no swelling at all in my feet or in my face. I was like completely fine, and I could fit my clothes, like even the tight ones, right away. And it was quite amazing. And they were like, wow, that recovery was very fast. And I was like, yeah, well, of course, because I wasn't getting any meds in a hospital, which usually takes much longer, and you have to take care of the injury and that sort of thing. My other sister had some complications with the injury. It actually opened up again. Oh my God, I didn't even know that story. Um, and that was really miserable for her. So from my both of my sisters, I had heard really not so great stories about their C-sections. I've heard from other women I know that they still have pain from the epidural they got in the hospital even after months of giving birth. So that's not comfortable either. And the only discomfort I had was what I mentioned when it comes to, of course, it is like your whole body is sore. It's like running a marathon or something, but it really all went healed quite quickly. And I kept taking those placenta pills. So that's why I say do research. Do not let your placenta in the hospital if you give birth in hospital, for example. Find out what you can do with it. I won't describe it here because I don't know, some people might get the wrong idea. So I leave that to you to investigate. But I'd say that it probably supported me to get back on track quite fine. Um, Another aspect is then the support. Also, my partner was really, really supportive because I wrote a blog. I actually wrote two blogs about my postpartum expression. Yeah. Which was more like, shocked and sometimes not feeling maternal, like that motherly flair, as I call it. And I didn't feel that instant love, like, oh my God, my baby, I love her so much, and that sort of thing. It wasn't at all in me to be referring to my baby that way or feeling none of that. So I was judging myself for that. Like, why is it that I'm not connected with my baby? I had the most natural birth and this isn't happening. And my partner was very supportive in terms of, well, you're comparing yourself to other mothers that probably have that at a feeling base, like energy, like, and that's not real. um, you are the mother that Minerva chose, and you are perfect for her, and you do your thing and you embrace yourself as a mother, and that's it. And he's very always like stable and very supportive and really on point with things. So there were times when I did like cried with him, like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing this correctly, or that sort of thing happened. Probably was hormones, probably was a shock of my life of having now a child. But he was very supportive always to be there to understand it, even though he has a little trouble understanding like emotions in people. He thinks therefore very like squarely when it comes to, well, do this and that, and then that's how it will work. So that was very supportive as well. But it is a phase of, as I mentioned before, mourning the end of the pregnancy, mourning that weight, mourning the end of my previous life and who I was, and now welcoming myself as a mother. The first time that when we had to do that first diaper change, it was like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. I felt like I was playing with a doll. It took me back to my infancy and that time when we would play with dolls and doing the brushing the hair and changing the diapers and the clothes. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this. This is what it is like. And everything went actually quite fine. I cannot really complain about that. And it was easier than most of the people told us it would be. I will leave this recording up to here. Perhaps I will expand next time on some other stuff when it comes to care, and perhaps if any of you has like questions, comments, that would be cool. but also more in relation to what this kind of birth process took us when it comes to making decisions on how to raise our child, which is something that we are still walking. So I will only comment on some of that because I very much want to first walk through it instead of kind of saying, oh, this is what we're going to do, and not really having an idea of how we go implementing it. So that will be the next video. But overall, when it comes to recovery, very fast, really no problems at all, no complications. Wow, it was really worthwhile, and my body went back into shape quite fast actually, and I couldn't wait to go back to starting some exercise, but that takes time. You have to wait like 3 months or so if you don't have any diastasis recti and or prolapse of your bladder, which I did have a little bit. So I had to wait. It's just outcomes of the postpartum experience. But overall, if you have the network of support, like family, being open to that, getting that support is very important if you do have it, because I know other women that would be like, no, I can do it on my own and with my partner, and it's not that easy. If you are alone, then consider freezing food. You probably heard this. Have ready your postpartum pads. You can also find out on YouTube how to do them, having them in the fridge and that sort of thing, adding certain oils to help and support with healing and the unswelling of your entire vagina area. And that's about it when it comes to the support. Taking vitamins, definitely necessary as well. And if you find a way to get your placenta back to you in some form, research about it and do so. Okay, so until next time, and thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, leave them in the comment section. Bye.